You're driving home through a quiet, tree-lined neighborhood at dusk. It's the kind of place where kids leave their bikes on the front lawn. But just a few blocks away, that peaceful evening is shattered by the sudden flash of blue and red police lights. 4 teenagers have been found dead in a local park. High school students committed these ambushes, using machetes and baseball bats to kill 15-year-old Nisa Mickens and 16-year-old Kayla Cuevas. This 2016 attack left a permanent scar on a Long Island community that never expected such brutality in its own backyard. These attackers belonged to Mara Salvatrucha, better known as MS-13. For this group, murder is a deliberate communication tool. They actively choose machetes over firearms because bodily mutilation sends a terrifying psychological message to everyone else in the community. This map shows the scale of their criminal network. You'll see dense clusters of activity across Central America, but follow the data north. The group has embedded itself deeply into the United States, with major hubs in Los Angeles, Houston, Virginia, and Long Island. The FBI estimates there are 10,000 members operating inside the US and over 50,000 worldwide. Once they establish a foothold, they extract wealth directly from the local economy. They systematically extort the neighborhoods they occupy. Small business owners, street vendors, and even ordinary families are forced to pay a weekly or monthly tax known as a renta. If you refuse to pay, they attack your family. How did a street gang originating from a small Central American nation manage to build a highly organized transnational empire right in the backyards of American suburbs? Between 1979 and 1992, El Salvador was ripped apart by a brutal civil war. Over 75,000 people died, and thousands of refugees fled the violence. Many of them crossed the border into the United States and landed in Los Angeles. Most of these refugees settled in a neighborhood called Pico Union, just west of downtown. They didn't find sanctuary. The area was already controlled by deeply established Mexican-American street gangs who saw these new immigrants as outsiders and easy targets for robbery and assault. The Salvadoran teenagers had no money and no legal protection, so they banded together. They called themselves the Mara Salvatrucha, Mara meaning group or posse, and Salvatrucha meaning street smart or alert. In the beginning, they were strictly a defensive survival group. But as the crack cocaine epidemic escalated the violence on LA streets, many members ended up in the California prison system. To survive on the inside, they aligned themselves with the Mexican Mafia, a massive prison syndicate. They added the number 13, the 13th letter of the alphabet, M, to their name to signal this alliance. Vulnerable teenagers built MS-13 as a desperate survival mechanism, adopting the extreme violence of the crack era to hold their ground on the streets of Los Angeles. By the 1990s, the US government recognized the growing threat and decided to act. They launched a mass deportation program and loaded thousands of convicted Salvadoran gang members onto planes, shipping them back to Central America. The problem was the destination. The deportees were landing in El Salvador, a country completely devastated by its civil war. The economy was in ruins, and the local police force was heavily under-resourced and overwhelmed. These deported gang members didn't abandon their identities. They brought the prison-hardened structure of Los Angeles directly into this fragile environment. They imported strict rules, extreme facial tattoos, and an absolute willingness to use force. In a landscape filled with traumatized, impoverished teenagers with zero economic opportunities, MS-13 found the perfect recruiting ground. They rapidly absorbed thousands of new members across El Salvador, Honduras, and Guatemala. To maintain order among these massive numbers, they enforced brutal internal mechanics. Every new recruit was required to endure a 13-second full-force beatdown by multiple gang members, a savage initiation designed to prove absolute, unbreakable loyalty. Once they consolidated power in Central America, the network expanded outward again. They systematically sent trained operatives back across the border into the United States, targeting fresh, highly profitable territory far beyond Los Angeles. The mass deportation policy was intended to neutralize a local street gang. Instead, the United States accidentally manufactured a highly organized transnational criminal empire. Traditional American law enforcement tactics struggle to contain this threat. Deportation has become a revolving door, with members returning to the U.S. almost immediately. For an MS-13 member, a sentence in a local American jail is often treated as a badge of honor. Furthermore, the gang employs a strict policy known as green lighting. Anyone suspected of defecting or cooperating with the police is marked for death, and every member is obligated to carry out the hit. This wall of terror actively paralyzes the justice system, making it nearly impossible to find witnesses willing to testify. Faced with decades of extortion and bloodshed, El Salvador initiated a radical pivot. In 2022, President Nayib Bukele declared a nationwide state of emergency, suspending constitutional rights to dismantle the gang by any means necessary. The government deployed the military into the streets. Within 16 months, they arrested over 70,000 suspected gang members. That is roughly 2% of the country's entire adult population, swept up in a massive, coordinated dragnet. To defeat an organization whose primary weapon is absolute terror, El Salvador determined they needed a government willing to completely suspend democratic norms and civil liberties. Thousands of these detainees were funneled into a newly constructed mega-prison known as CECOT. Designed to hold 40,000 inmates, the facility strips prisoners of all rights. They sleep on stacked metal bunks without mattresses, endure constant artificial lighting, and are permanently severed from any contact with the outside world. The results are undeniable. El Salvador's homicide rates plummeted to historic lows, and citizens can finally walk their streets in peace. Yet human rights organizations point out the terrifying cost. Thousands of innocent people have reportedly been swallowed by this system without a trial, legal representation, or due process. MS-13 was forged by poverty, civil war, and short-sighted policies. Now, the existence of this empire forces the modern world into a chilling dilemma. Exactly how much freedom and humanity is society willing to sacrifice just to feel safe?